the internal contradictions of the economic program of Mr. Trump, then you'll see that this is what I've just told you is all over the place. Not just with tariffs, but with deporting immigrants and so on. You know, the secondary consequences here ought to make any rational government stop. And the fact that this government isn't stopping, well, draw the conclusion. Let me try to illustrate the contradictions, internal craziness of what is being proposed. And I'm going to do that in two ways. I'm going to use what we in economics call supply and demand analysis, a very simple-minded approach we teach students as a beginning to understanding economics. And then I'm going to also use the Marxian economics idea of surplus, which gives you insights that the supply and demand apparatus doesn't. Okay, the president says, and has already in the first weeks of his administration, illustrated dramatically that he is going to deport undocumented immigrants, of which the Homeland Security Department of this country says we have somewhere around 12 million, 10 to 15 million, somewhere in there. Okay, let's take a look at what this might mean. Mostly these are undocumented immigrants, are young people of working age. Yes, some of them bring children when they come, but most don't. And some of them bring their elderly, but most don't. These are young men and women who can travel through the desert and take the hardships that are involved in coming here for many. So they arrive here and they take the worst jobs. And by worst jobs, I don't just mean those that are poorly paid, although that's the majority of them. I mean jobs that are dangerous, jobs that are irregular, jobs for employers that are highly unscrupulous much of the time. And the reason they have those jobs is because, unlike a native-born worker, they will never go to the police to complain if they're made to work without protective gear, or they're made to work too many hours, or they're made to work without being given the pay that they were promised when they undertook the job. Employers know that they can get away with this because they've been doing that forever, for time immemorial, which means that the immigrant is particularly profitable as an employee because you can rip them off, basically. And that's one of the reasons that the United States has always welcomed employees, because the employers knew you could do things with them you couldn't otherwise. I could go on. You also cram these people into the worst neighborhoods with the lousiest housing, again, because they cannot and will not complain. They will not demand what is legally available to them for fear that it will blow their cover and they will be hassled by the police. The police don't treat them very well, again, for the same reasons, and so on. So I'm not going to mention what it means to target these people, many of whom have spent years at the bottom of the jobs pyramid in the United States. What it means exactly, ethically or morally, to pick them up off the street, put them in shackles, which is being done now, and dropping them in Mexico or Colombia or wherever you can impose that. There, how this squares with Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or any other religious system I know of, I leave to the mysteries of how human beings are religious. Extraordinary. But I'm not going to focus on that. Here's the supply and demand. You are reducing the supply of labor. You're literally taking people who had offered and delivered labor effort, brains and muscles, 8 hours a day or more, across the United States. Millions of them are being withdrawn from the labor market. So the supply of workers is being cut. You know, if you're going to get rid of 10 million people, it's going to make an impact. On the other hand, you're going to impose tariffs, meaning that goods produced abroad will no longer be purchased by Americans because they become more expensive. Mr. Trump has said, and by the time this airs, he may well have imposed 25% tariffs on both Canadian and Mexican goods. And again, I'm not,
Wow.
That's what he said. And he had promised to do that earlier, so they're consistent. That violates the treaties that were initially signed by Mr. Clinton, the NAFTA, and then rewritten and re-signed by Trump himself in his first presidency with a new name. But it's basically a common market between the United States, Canada to the north, Mexico to the south, and it meant that goods could move between them without tax, no tax being applied by any of the three countries to any of the other. He's abrogating that. He's not having a conference to discuss it. He's not having meetings with the leadership to talk. Unilaterally abrogating, which is the politest way you can put this, violating would be another term, this treaty with our two neighbors. Interesting move.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to assume it goes through in one form or another. The United States is the major market for both of those countries. Therefore, this is a big blow to them because they're going to see the demand for their exports to the United States drop because an American has to pay his own government, the American government, the tariff, the tax, and that makes it more expensive in the manner I just went through with the electric car from China. So it's going to hurt them. And Mr. Trump never discusses the hurt done to them, deals with them as if they're bad people, and says this is all done because they allow fentanyl to come through their countries into the United States. Notice, the bad guy is the one who allows the movement, not the country to which the movement is directed, because Americans buy and consume that stuff at a record level. Nope, none of that. Interesting. No, Mr. Trump says it's also, he admits, to reshore America, right? Because if it's too expensive to bring the object from Canada in, or from Mexico in, the hope is that the producer will come back to the United States, make it inside, because then there's no tariff that's applicable. All right, I'm not going to discuss the obvious, and I'm glad you're smiling because it really is childishly obvious that a producer in Canada or Mexico would be nuts to come here right away because he doesn't know how long Mr. Trump will stay with this policy. He doesn't know whether it'll disappear when Mr. Trump disappears. And it's very expensive. So, we also don't know whether the company affected like this will leave Mexico and go across its southern border into Guatemala, another place which doesn't have a tariff. But then it can't risk doing that because Mr. Trump will put the tariff on against the Guatemalan goods. So let's assume that some reshoring takes place. Some companies at the margin will come in to the United States and produce here at home, the ostensible goal and purpose of all of this. That would mean an increase in the demand for labor, because those companies, instead of hiring Mexican and Canadian workers, by coming back, would be hiring American workers, which is the ostensible purpose. Okay, the supply of labor is going down and the demand for labor is going up. What is that supposed to do with demand and supply analysis? Answer: it's going to raise wages a lot. Why? Because you can't rip off American-born workers the way you ripped them. So you're going to have to pay wages you never thought you'd have to. So wages will go up in the United States. Whoa. Now let's take it 2 more steps and we're done. Why would capitalists across America who supported Mr. Trump welcome that the cost of labor is going up and eating into their profits?
Seems like a contradiction.
But we're not done. Because when Mr. Trump imposes a tariff, one of the results, the textbooks are full of this, is called retaliation. Other countries can put tariffs just like we can, which means American companies who export are going to have the same problem. They're not going to have a market the way they used to because the countries retaliate. They put a tariff on goods from America, and they've said it. If you tariff us, we will retaliate. So the companies will have higher wages to pay while they can't sell the way they used to. That's a 1-2 punch right in the nose of the employer class. They're the ones who gave him the job. That's not his job in their minds. How's he going to handle what I just described? What? Not only that, but if you put a tariff and the prices go up, what the literature teaches is that the protected companies, the ones who like it that you put a tariffs so your Canadian competitor can't compete with you anymore and your Mexican competitor can't. What you induce the Americans to say, great, I can raise my prices. Because even if I raise them 10%, they've stuck the Canadians with 25% tariff. Everyone's going to have to pay me my 10% more because it's still better than the alternative they can get. You know what that means? You're going to get an inflation. Is it possible that other things, which I don't have the time, but if you want to, we can go there, that other things will neutralize what I just said? That's possible. That's what I meant by a Hail Mary pass. What he's doing is ridiculous economically. And so maybe his rejoinder, or someone who's smarter than him might be able to do, is to say, yes, but if this, and this happen, well, that's possible. It's always possible. But it's not the logical thing to expect. And to expect it from someone who never mentions any of these things, even though, as I hope I've showed you, they're as simple as apple pie. There are no mystery here. There's nothing complicated. And the literature about these things is full of all of this. Not a word of what I just said to you is original to me. Not at all. So all I can tell you is, with this level of contradiction at the basis of what is being proposed here, you're looking at a really strange phenomena unfolding.